tutors, mentors, and the city with your host.com.
The City Tutors presents
Tutors, mentors, and the city
with your host.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Kevin.com Brown, and welcome to Tutors, Mentors, and the City. And we're going to just jump right in. Please help me welcome our guest for this episode, Miss Aubrey Wechsler. Yay!
Thank you. I feel like I should have come prepared with a full pizza to fold into one bite.
Now, as I was saying your name, I felt like I had messed it up a little bit. Is it Wechsler?
You nailed it.
Wechsler?
You nailed it. No,
that was
honestly,
good?
that was an expert pronunciation. I guess it's Austrian lineage, but German word. I would be very impressed. Most people call us Wechsler and Wechsler and all these things, but Wechsler, like an X, is correct. So thank you so much, Kevin.
Ah, nice. Okay. So I score a point right at the beginning.
There you go, right off the top.
So, Aubrey, who are you?
Oh gosh, that's an existential question if I've ever heard one. Yeah, when you asked me to do this, it was a very strange thing for me because I am kind of a very average person, who has a very interesting job, but even the interesting job is, most days fairly normal. But I am an attorney by training, but not in practice. I work full-time in-house at the New York Mets baseball team, if you're not a sports fan. I've been there about 5.5 years. My role has changed somewhat over that time, but generally I work in the HR space, and my customers are the employees of the Mets, whether it's employee engagement, whether it's employee relations, whether it's like what they call HR business partner, HRBP work, which is more like project stuff. But at the end of the day, my product and my work is people at a very interesting place, which is a professional sports team.
Very cool. So,
and also I'm a Scorpio who likes dogs and walks on the beach, right? Who am I?
Scorpio. So your birthday's coming up soon, or just passed? What's that?
It's coming up.
My brother's birthday is today.
Happy birthday, Kevin's brother.
I have to call him. He wouldn't care, but I have to let him know I remember. Guys, we don't dwell on the birthday thing. We just happy we made it to it, but we don't need to. But I do have to call my big brother.
It is my mother's birthday on Sunday, so happy early birthday to my mother as well.
Okay. So happy early birthday to you.
Thank you.
Now, that being said, let's rewind the clock. Tell us where you started. Where are you from? What is your point of origin?
Yeah, I am from a place that people deny exists, Central New Jersey. In New Jersey, people fight over North Jersey, South Jersey, and pretend that Central Jersey doesn't exist, but it absolutely does. I grew up in a town called Edison, New Jersey, which is a fairly big one. Very privileged to be from there. It's a wonderfully diverse area of a diverse part of this country. And my parents' names are Steve and Jamie Wechsler. I have a wonderful brother named Jay. I lived there all the way through college. I went to a fabulous college called the College of New Jersey, which if you're not from New Jersey, you probably don't know it. Hello, all you TCNJ fans. And then I went to Widener University Law School in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And then I had a challenge. I expected to be a criminal lawyer. That's what I had studied. That's what I wanted to do. I had interned doing that when I was in law school. That was what, I saw myself doing. I really wanted to do a job of service. I was really passionate about that, the idea of providing a defense to people who couldn't afford one on their own, that kind of everyone's entitled to it. And there was some political things that kind of crossed hairs with my working there, and it really set me back. And I spent sort of the first 2 years after school kind of reeling from that challenge. It was a very bad economic time when I had left school. The job market was not what it is now. I faced that challenge really early on, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't, really kind of put me through the ringer. It was a very difficult thing. And what I did do, and I give my parents credit for really pushing me to do this, which was I just kind of got myself out there as much as I could. I did a lot of volunteer and free work, which I also recognize as a privilege. Not everybody can do that. Take a job that pays no money. But I did a lot of volunteer work, a lot of interning, a lot of just kind of being a fly on the wall and seeing what was going on. And one of those things that I did was being a volunteer attorney at New Jersey Transit. If you're familiar with the kind of commuter rails from New Jersey to New York, whether it's bus or train, that's the main line there. And I worked there for probably 3 months, and a wonderful lawyer there who was very kind to me told me there was a position opening full time, knowing I was looking to do something full time. And it started off kind of in a small space of very, very niche, very specific thing, doing work with the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, which is as exciting as it sounds. And I started to dabble in doing employer relations, which I was very lucky that started to kind of trend towards people with law degrees like myself right around that time. And I use that as my pathway to my next opportunity. I worked at a very large healthcare company shortly after. And I hadn't been there terribly long, maybe around a year, when my best friend, hi Megan, my best friend who also works in an HR space, was looking for a job for herself, and saw an ad at the New York Mets for an employee relations manager, which was the original job I had at the Mets. And I think the email that she sent me, the subject line said, "Your dream come true," or something along those lines, because she was right. I'm a lifelong diehard Mets fan. It occurred to me kind of hyperbolically that people work in sports, but I didn't know anyone who did. And I certainly knew, even without having applied for it, how competitive it must be. Every fan in the world wants to be, serving their favorite team, whether it's the Mets or the Yankees or the Red Sox or, gosh, no one wants to say the Phillies, right? But it was really, a shot in the dark to some degree. But I don't consider myself highly confident or, a person with really kind of hubris in any way. But I said to myself at the time, and I said to some very close friends who I could trust with this type of hubris, I said, I'm going to get this job. I had decided it, the job description, we've all done that. We've applied for a job where the job description looks like it's written for you. It's exactly what you've been doing. It's the exact years of experience you have. It was all the things that you're looking for, but you apply for those and it's crickets, even in those cases. So of course, even though I felt like I checked all the boxes, I was incredibly nervous and knew it was a shot in the dark. And there was probably 1,000 people, mixed in with my resume that I'd be competing with. And it was a very arduous process. It took a long time. But I'd like to think that confidence played in. And I do want to give my mother credit. She always said to me, even before this, she said, even for the toughest, opportunity, somebody's going to get that job. Why can't it be you? And I did have that kind of as a seed in my mind as I was going through that process. And, looking back now, all these years later, it's still something that I've been very impacted by. I'm very proud of. It's going to always be a red letter experience in my life. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity that I've had. That was a very long.
Well, you know what you did? What's that?
It was a very long-winded answer. I'm so sorry.
You answered questions 7 through 15.
Oh, no.
And you fast forwarded. Okay. So thank you.
Of course.
I know I don't have to ask those questions.
There you go.
But I'm not going to let you fast forward through the beginning, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I am from New York and I actually drove through the Turnpike and went to Baltimore this past weekend. Yes. And I think I went through Edison. But my knowledge, my knowledge of New Jersey is the Turnpike. What exit on the Turnpike is Edison?
Somewhere between 10 and 11. You could do either, depending if you're going north or south. The what's your exit is a true thing in New Jersey, whether you're talking about the Parkway, the Turnpike. We identify with our exits. Several years ago, they changed our Parkway exit, and it very much upset my family. They were like, we've been 131 for all these years, and now they're changing it. But yeah, that's exit 10, exit 11 on the Turnpike.
And what kind of town is Edison?
Strangely, it's very big. It's a suburb, but it is, I want to say at least it was the 5th largest city in New Jersey, behind the kind of classics, Elizabeth and Trenton and Newark. It is extremely, like I said, extremely large, high population. But like I said earlier, incredibly diverse, which was, now that I'm an adult and I look back, on kind of what's made me the person I am, I think the diversity that I was exposed to at such a young age and kind of consistently throughout my upbringing really gives you a different take on the world and a different understanding of the differences between all of us, and that we do come into the world with so many differences that need to be respected and need to be listened to, and understanding that our differences make us bring us closer together rather than bring us further apart. And so I was really lucky that there were people from all over the world, all different cultures, all different sizes, colors, living in the town that I grew up in. And strangely, as I moved to college and law school, it was much less diverse. And I found myself feeling less comfortable and less familiar in those times of my life. And where I live now here, I'm in Jackson Heights, Queens, which is incredibly, very strangely, similarly diverse to where I grew up. And I remember my friends asking me about that. And I said, maybe it calls to me, like a Moana style call, because it really felt like home. And it even though it's suburb versus city where I live now, there's a familiarity to that comes with that, and a comfort that comes with that I really seek out.
Public school or private school?
Public school.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was your upbringing like? Did you have siblings?
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah, I have an older brother. He and I have always been best friends. I talk to friends and people at work about, kind of the classic adversarial relationship that people have with their siblings. And I did not have that. I was blessed from birth with a brother who adored me and treated me incredibly well and incredibly kind. We have the same sense of humor. We are friends and we're family, which is really nice. He strangely married one of my best friends from college. So we still, exist in the same social circle, which is very funny. But yeah, so I was very lucky to have that. I have one brother and I hit the lottery. My parents are incredibly well-educated, incredibly intelligent, incredibly funny, kind people. They came from New York and migrated to New Jersey to be closer to my mother's family, who had moved there some years before. I think that's the piece. My parents never really wanted to leave New York behind. Everyone in my family was born in New York except for me. And I think my mother would hate that I'm announcing this on a podcast that I am of New Jersey. And I think she finds a lot of peace that I've moved back. But my parents always worked. They were always really passionate about what they did, and were really focused, and they understood that what they were doing was important and they were committed to it. And when I want to say in high school, my mother opened her own business, which was a huge accomplishment for her. And it was incredibly successful for over 20 years and until she retired just recently. And she had the same business partner for the length of time that she ran this business. They had worked together in several places prior, and their partnership and their friendship, which continues on to this day. She was just visiting my mother last weekend. Really, really had an impact on me. Seeing powerful women, intelligent women who knew what they were doing and owned the space that they worked in, and really wanted to put out the best product they possibly could and serve their clients in the best possible way. And the relationship they have with each other, the mutual respect, the understanding each other's challenges and each other's strengths. And that at the end of the day, they were always friends and they were always family. And the integrity that they used as their kind of guiding principle in everything they did really had an impact for me in those formative years. I wonder if they had started that business earlier or later, what it would have been like. But I was really in that kind of sweet spot of I was finishing out high school, heading into college and figuring out, who I was going to be as an adult and moving into the working world. And it had still has a tremendous impact, and it still, kind of guides me in my everyday working.
Okay. So in your younger years, your school years, what did you do for fun? What were your hobbies?
I was very into sports. I'm a person, obviously, of limited interest. I played sports growing up. My brother was not very into that. He was more of a kind of a song and dance and music guy. And I really liked sports, and I was my father's, best friend in that. I watched baseball games with him when nobody else would when I was really young. But I played softball all growing up, soccer like everyone else in the suburbs when I was a kid. And as I moved into high school, I continued doing that. I played softball for 3 years and had to stop for injured my shoulder. And I played volleyball as a captain of the volleyball team in high school as well. It was really great. It's hard to speak about yourself as a kid when you're an adult with full clarity, but it's very different as a child. I was much more shy, much more introverted. And I think, as every year has passed, I have become less so, and sort of somewhere more towards the middle or somewhere more towards extroversion. And part of that is what I do for a living, but also, having those places where I've felt comfortable. And for me, being on a team and having the camaraderie and the kind of like-mindedness that came with that, really was something that shaped me as I was growing up, and something I sought out, for even after high school. When I was in college, I never thought I would, but I joined a sorority, which I would thought if you had bet me $1 million, I would have taken it before college. But I did that, and I really found my people, and found the version of one that felt comfortable and familiar to me. And I found, the friends that I will have for life and who are soulmates to me. And after college, I did a year of service. I was very lucky to do a year of service with AmeriCorps, which is a terrific organization if you're familiar. And similarly, found really like-minded, kind of passionate people who are passionate about the same things I was at the time, which was to be able to do that full year of service, and still have a lot of really great friends from there as well. So kind of sought that team, like-minded, comfortable environment all the way through now, which is what's so comfortable about my experiences at the Mets and what I like best about working there.
Okay, so I'm a Mets guy too, right? I'm a Mets guy.
I knew I liked you.
Yeah, yes, and I liked you too. I born and raised in the Bronx, but I was a Tom Seaver fan from when I was a kid. He was actually the first baseball card that I ever got. And I wasn't
not a bad one.
Yes. And I wasn't a baseball card kid, but the gum that used to come in the baseball cards was the best gum. It was the tastiest gum ever. Right?
If it was over a week old, though, it really would set you back.
Well, I wouldn't let it last a week. Like I bought the cards to get the gum. Right. Exactly. And I'm eating it immediately. And I remember doing that because it had a great sweetness. It had that little powder thing on it. And once you got through the powder, it was just delicious to me. And out of all the baseball cards that I ever got, Tom Seaver was the one that I protected. I coveted. I admired him so much.
Do you still have it?
So no, I didn't know. I didn't know about the value. I didn't have anybody who was educated about the world of baseball cards, and how you protect them, and you probably don't want to, and you put them in a thing and you keep them in a hermetically sealed, nobody was around me like that. It was just me and my friends, and we liked the gum.
Fair enough.
Yes. And then I became a Mets fan, with the Darryl Strawberry years and Keith Hernandez in the 86, World Series. So I'm more of a Mets guy, but I'm a New York guy.
Well, they say a true New Yorker is a Mets fan. They say true New Yorkers are Mets fans.
Well, I'm that. I'm definitely that. But I rock with the other guys out of default. They're not far from my house and all that stuff. Okay. But from my childhood, Tom Seaver was it for me. He was that dude for me. But I don't, because you fast forwarded through your story and then you threw me the ball back at the Mets, right?
Yeah.
He told me about your legal thing. You threw me the ball back at the Mets. I don't want to dwell on the Mets yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
You don't look like a lawyer, right? You look like a little girl. You look like a schoolgirl. Okay. You got your schoolgirl sweater. You got your cute, adorable smile. you can't be, you got a birthday coming up and you probably might just be turning 21.
Oh, if only.
That's what you look like. Did you face that? Was that a thing while you were journeying through your law school adventures and such, that you look like a baby?
Gosh, that's very flattering. Thank you. It's funny. I was talking to somebody at work recently, and I was mentioned how old I was, and they're like, "No, you're not." And I couldn't decide if I should be flattered or offended, because the idea of how old I actually am horrified them. But I guess they were saying I looked young. I credit my father for good skin. I'll say that. I think that's part of it. I think to be candid, I don't think like being youthful looking, there were people who probably looked younger than me that I went to school with. It may be personality wise, I tend to be a little goofy, a little funny, a little light. So maybe that had an impact more than just kind of youthful appearance. And also, I think being a woman is still tricky in so many spaces. And, I was in law school from 2008 through 2010. And so that was pretty recently, pretty modern times. And I remember we had an oral argument, I think it was my first year for a class, and we had to dress like we were in court. And, the expectation was that you were wearing suits, and they told the women that we had to wear skirt suits. And their rationale for this was that there are some judges who still exist who are old school and they prefer that. And even then in 2008 or 9, I was so offended by this. And I thought, first of all, we were also poor students who I didn't own a skirt suit. I was like, I now have to get this. Like, I think I mismatched them. I just took something black that I had in both spaces. But I was like, I understand their point to some degree, like that you need to be nimble with, your audience, but this was a mock trial. And if anything, I think they should have been challenging that idea that wear what you want, right? It's a place that's a world that's changing. And I don't think that's something that would be said today without you making the news, probably. But, even then we lived in a world where shortly thereafter there was a woman running for president, right? And it really was a message that stuck with me. It's strangely, I don't remember how I did on that assignment, but I remember that. And I still talk about it as something that was so antiquated and really sat badly with me, that yes, this is there's a patriarchy, there's this thing, yeah, people are old school, so we're not going to challenge them. And I felt like in a space where you're being taught to argue, shouldn't we be challenging those things and challenging those ideals? It kind of felt to me like that image of British courts, right, where people still wear the wigs, whether it actually does anything or not, which to me seems actually less ridiculous than the idea that you should still have to wear a skirt in court if you're a woman. So I think I probably felt more challenged by just the nature of my goofy personality. And also, there's still, in our society, we would be ignoring it if we didn't say it, still a lot of challenges for women. And I think some of that even comes from women. There's a lot of sexist women out there who the person who told us to do this was a female professor. So there are a lot of women who don't, move us forward. We see it in politics, we see it in the world. And I think there's still a lot of challenges there.
Yes, there are. What would you do in reflecting back?
I think, like I said, I'm kind of a different version of myself now. Now I've aged and I've grown into my, confidence and personality. I probably would have challenged it, or I just would have ignored it and worn what I wanted. I probably should have done that and seen if they marked my grade, and then, taken it to the man. All the way up to the Supreme Court, right? They marked my grade down for, freedom of expression or whatever it might have been. But I think I would have handled it differently at the age, I won't say how old I am now, at this age now versus when I was probably 23 when this happened. And it's definitely, I don't think we change that much on who we are as an individual, the things we believe, the things we like. But I think we change in our assertiveness and how much we value the things we stand for and how we approach them when we don't find that. I think I'm much more committed to, obviously the world has changed and that hasn't, but I'm much more committed to political endeavors and my beliefs in those spaces than I was then. Even though it was still super important to me, I wanted to do service, I wanted to seek out a certain type of law. but I think in my day-to-day, I feel much more assertive and much more confident in it.
I was talking to my daughter the other day, and her mother worked at Howard University.
Not bad.
And right. And she was able to go to Howard University for free.
Also not bad.
And right. But she didn't choose to go to Howard. She chose to go to Virginia Commonwealth University.
Okay.
And I remember when they called me and told me that she was going there. And I said, what? Why? Why are you going there when you can go to Howard for free? And she gave her reasons, and her mother supported it, and they were turning me into the bad guy. And I said, oh my goodness, if you were my son, I would never stand for this, right? In my mind, if it was my son in the same circumstance, I would have said, boy, are you crazy? You better take your butt over to that school your mother works at and get that free education. And if you want to go somewhere else, you pay for it. That's what I would have told my son. No, I wouldn't have lost an ounce of sleep over that response. So I speak to my daughter the other day, and I said, your dad might be a little misogynistic, because I should have told you that, right? I shouldn't have had a different answer for my daughter that I had for my son. I said that to my daughter the other day. Mm-hmm. And she didn't, I don't know if she knew how to receive my response, but she was like, oh, Dad. And I was like, yeah, but I should have given my daughter the same response I should have given my son. But I was delicate with my daughter because I don't know, how to interact with girls or my baby. She's my oldest, and I don't know, and I don't want to scar her, and she had me wrapped around her little finger. But I bring that up to say that that's my response now. Right? That's my response in hindsight. So when I talk to my daughter now, she's a grown woman, but she still comes to me for advice. Mm-hmm. And I say, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll tell you what I would do. And then let you decide what you're going to do. And if you make a bad decision, don't blame me. Right?
And I think that's it. Yeah. And strangely, maybe it's not out of misogyny. I think also, and this is not meant to be misogynistic either, but I think men and women mature differently, right? So your daughter probably had a laundry list of reasons why she decided to go to Virginia Commonwealth instead of Howard. She probably was more secure in that it's a life-changing decision, right? It's a life-impacting decision, but had probably weighed those options differently than an 18-year-old boy would have. Not to say it's across the board. There's probably exceptions in both cases. But I think that first time your parents trust you to make a big decision for yourself is humongous. And we all remember those moments, right? Mm-hmm. My parents didn't want me to do AmeriCorps. My mom wanted me to go straight to school, right to law school. And I didn't feel like that was right for me. And that was probably it was a couple of years after your daughter would have made that call. It was the first time I really kind of challenged what I knew my parents wanted from me. And there were things about it that were great, and there were things about it that I would have done differently. But having that first moment where you kind of step outside the nest and you're making decisions as an adult, and facing the consequences that come with it, is a really important thing. Oh, there goes my girl behind us.
Yes, I love it. So AmeriCorps, what was that like for you? Where did AmeriCorps take you?
Yeah, AmeriCorps has a lot of different versions. A lot of them do traveling around the country. The one that I did was sort of kind of in one stagnant place in Paterson, New Jersey, if you're familiar, which is a very large inner city in northern New Jersey. And so it stayed, we all lived at home. Sometimes AmeriCorps, they travel together and live together and things like that. But we all were New Jersey residents who went there to it was actually functioned out of a nonprofit in Paterson called NJCDC. New Jersey Community Development Corporation, I think, if I remember that far back. And it really functioned within the confines of that nonprofit. So whether it was school-based programs, whether it was programs for young people learning job skills, there was a daycare programming, there was a ton of things available. And so we all worked really closely together, and we really got our hands dirty in the community. And we did just a smaller, independent, community-based project throughout the time that I was there. And there were several things that I participated in, having had that opportunity, that really shaped my next steps in life, and still are things I think about now. We participated in something called a homeless count, which was, there's one night a year where people go out all hours of the day. I think they do it for 24 hours straight, and they physically count the homeless people that they encounter, to understand the numbers we're looking at is obviously something that's very difficult to track. And my colleagues and I, my friends and I, we worked the 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. shift. And it was one of those Northeast February nights that was just so bitterly cold that you couldn't think straight. And the experience in coming upon those people and, seeing those types of things, you can care about homelessness all you want, but until you really encounter it in that kind of way firsthand, and not to say you could understand it, as well as somebody who's experienced it personally, but, seeing those things firsthand really, really does have an impact. And it was something that I was both very, very upset by, but very, very much shaped by. I would say it was about 18 months after Hurricane Katrina when I was doing this. And there was still, unfortunately, a tremendous amount of work to be done in the Gulf states. So we kind of self-funded a trip with 30 of us from New Jersey to Mississippi, and did some work on some houses down there. And a New Jersey Mississippi road trip is a once in a lifetime experience with 25 people. But having been able to participate in the rebuild in the Gulf was hugely impactful. And also, to be candid, I don't think I would have ever found myself in Mississippi otherwise. And I don't know if you've been there, but to some degree, it's sort of like visiting a foreign country. It's incredibly different. At that point, I had only really ever lived in New Jersey. And being exposed to the differences between a state like Mississippi, whether it's socioeconomics, whether it's the fact that, racism is still much more prevalent. Unfortunately, there's still issues here, of course, but much more prevalent there. And we went down there with an incredibly diverse group of people of all different races, all different religions, all different, people who were straight, people who were gay, people who were transgender. We went down there with, the full mixed bag that comes from the Northeast. And we headed down to Mississippi with the intent to get our hands dirty and do some work and help the people there. And it was a really one of the most impactful cultural experiences I think I've ever had, just kind of seeing the differences that exist within the confines of our own country. I think we seek out international travel and things like that. And I've had fabulous experiences seeing other cultures outside of America. But when we're faced with the differences that still exist among us, it's a really interesting lesson to learn. I still think about it often, and it's been, probably 15 years.
Right. Yeah. I was just interviewing someone who came up through AmeriCorps also. So you're mentioning it for the second time.
Let's go.
As far as the interviews go. So you're the second person telling me about it, is what I'm saying.
It's a beautiful organization. I'm very proud to have.
Yes. And the person who I was interviewing works for the Colin Powell School at City College. And I had told them I never got a chance to meet Colin Powell, but he was a giant amongst giants. And we were both from the Bronx, both graduates of City College. We both loved our school. We both came back. And if I can make half the contribution that he's made to, my school, it'll be incredible. But this administrator, she came up through AmeriCorps, and I bring up Colin Powell because she said he was very influential in the creation or the leadership of AmeriCorps.
Sure.
And all the great programs and how much she learned from it and how it, gave her skills and such. So we, meaning myself and the viewers of this podcast, we're not unfamiliar with AmeriCorps now, right?
Yes.
Now, that being said, When did the law bug hit you?
You know, candidly, I don't know that it ever really did. And that's probably why I didn't find a way to practice even after the challenges I had. You know, my father's a lawyer. He practiced it in the real estate space, which did not interest me. And I liked the kind of cerebral aspects to it. I liked the analytical parts of it. I really liked, I think, different than a lot of people who go to law school, I really liked criminal law. That's where I was most interested. That's what I studied in college. I studied criminology in college. And so I think I sort of had tunnel vision in that space. And when that didn't work out, I didn't feel that there was like an alternative that really attracted me. But you know, I went into college not knowing what I wanted my major to be. And then I kind of settled into that thinking, oh, I could be a lawyer. I think, you know, I can think like that. I can do that. And then, you know, didn't really know what I wanted, and took that year to do AmeriCorps to say, like, is this what I want? Do I want to spend the next 3 years in that kind of lifestyle, which is law school is a brutal lifestyle. And then found myself, you know, missing the people person part of it. You know, that's why I kind of sought the position in the public defenders at the time, because there was more of a people piece and more of an interactive type of law, but so much of law is paper. So much of law is writing and reading. And I think that's why I found myself so much more comfortable in this kind of law adjacent work, which is having that knowledge is helpful, understanding when you read a contract or read a policy or read something like the FMLA, understanding what it is, but still using that understanding for the benefit of people. But yeah, I think we try to think about what made it. Like, I think so many of us have a crooked road, and sometimes when you're young, you kind of take a leap and a guess, right? I wasn't sure. You know, a lot of people where I went to college became teachers. It's a big teaching school, and I admire the fact that they knew, like, this is what I'm going to do. This is going to be my job forever. You know, these days we're seeing a lot of teachers leaving the profession, but at that time, you were a teacher, and you were a teacher from the day you started working until the day you retired, and then you lived off your pension, and that was the end of it, right? Maybe you were a tutor along the way, but that was going to be your job. And the idea of making a decision like that at 18 years old kind of blows my mind thinking back to it. You know, I also decided to go skydiving when I was 18 years old, something I would never do now, right? So the idea that you can kind of shape the rest of your life at that time. So, you know, when I'm at work now, and I spend, you know, there's a lot of young people at the Mets, and I do try to offer advice and counsel. One of the things I tell them, you know, sometimes we see people, they're 25, 26 years old, and they're not sure if what they're doing is what they want to do forever. And I always try to give them the same advice. I say, there's very few things you can do that will really disrupt your career permanently, like really have a longer impact. If you steal stuff, if you harass somebody, those things are going to stay with you. But exploring new things or wanting to take on, like, hey, I'm working in marketing, now I'm interested in accounting, that's not going to hurt you. This is the time, you know, when you're young and you're in your 20s, where you need to explore and figure out which lane feels right for you, because eventually when you're, you know, a couple more years in, that's when you're kind of going to be locked into your experience, right? At that point, you're 5-6 years into experience, you know, kind of you have a basis for what you're doing. And then you're probably not going to move too much around. If you do, it's going to be something similar to what you've been doing. So I always encourage people to explore and to find their path, even after they've started working. You know, so the idea of determining your own path at 18 is looking back, is wild to me still.
Okay. So I'm trying to avoid this.
Okay.
But I ask you your questions, you give me these excellent answers.
Thank you.
And then it takes me back to the Mets.
Let's talk about it.
Well, I'm trying to resist. So, but we keep getting back there. The Mets, super fan. What was it like? What was the interview process like?
Yeah. It was brutal. I mean, the Mets still use kind of the first thing we do is like a digital interview. And at the time I remember like, this is awesome. There's not going to be another person here. You know, you can be cool and comfortable. You can wear sweatpants, do whatever you will. And it's like, you get like a certain amount of time to practice, but before you see the question, just kind of practice the thing. But I felt like I really blew it. And I was very upset thinking I totally destroyed my chance at my dream job. Because it's a strange thing when you're talking to just nothingness. Like it would be like you and I doing this with nobody on the other side. And you kind of have a tendency to ramble and not to know when to stop talking. And there's no context to the questions. You're just reading them on the screen, right? So you can't get inflection. You can't understand. I remember they asked me who was my favorite manager in my past. And I couldn't just figure out if they were asking me about a job manager I'd had or a manager of the Mets. So I answered it both ways. And I felt like I totally blew it. And I emailed immediately the person who became my first boss at the Mets, like apologizing and basically begging for a second chance. And she was very gracious and she responded to me and was like, no, you did great. And I think to this day, I still have the ability to watch it, you know, to get into that system and to watch it. And I've never had the courage to do it. I keep trying to get my colleagues to delete it for me before it gets into anybody else's hands. But yeah, so it was a really arduous process. There was that. And then there was a project, which is sort of something we're seeing emerge more and more as part of a recruitment process, is to do some sort of project work to kind of show off your skills in the space you're trying to occupy. And then I just met with a lot of people that I'd be working with on a regular basis. And that actually was the part of it that I really enjoyed the most. You know, I met with the team I'd be working with day to day, but also people who, you know, kind of outside of the HR space where I'd have the most work to do. Some of those people are still people that I'm very close with at the Mets, and I've kind of sought out as mentors. So it really did give me kind of a full breadth of what the company was, but it probably was 5 interviews back and forth from New Jersey to Queens. At some point, I was like, just tell me if I got it or not. I'm losing my mind here. And it went on for several months. I think that was a little out of the norm. I think there was probably just some like, you know, business things happening at the time that slowed things down, that in my own head was all about me. But it was tough and it was competitive, and it really, you know, I had a lot riding on it emotionally. You know, I tried to play it cool. I tried not to tell my friends that I was interviewing there, and I couldn't do any of it. I couldn't play it cool. I couldn't not tell I remember I just went last week into a restaurant that I think I've been to once before. And my friends and I were talking about the time we'd been there before. And I remembered that night telling 2 of my friends that I was in like the late stages of interviewing at the Mets. And my friends always, you know, they know this is Aubrey. She likes dogs in the Mets. So they knew what that meant for me even then. And it's funny to see kind of how it's gone from there all these years later.
Now you said the interview process, you're reading the questions, mm-hmm. and you can go back to the thing and get access to what does that mean? So it wasn't like Zoom, it wasn't like talking
it's sort of like a Zoom with nobody there. So like on the screen pops up the question, you have like 30 seconds to think about it, and then you have 3 minutes to answer. So so it's a company called HireVue that does these like digital, it's very commonly used. But you can basically record answers to questions that are created for the job you're interviewing for. Strangely, a couple of years ago, my colleagues and I, we were recruiting for our summer interns. Obviously, we get a ton of people trying to be interns, and we wanted to put a question out there that they can kind of make it their own. Like, show us your creativity question. And we asked a question that said, you have three slices of cake and 8 people. Tell us how you would split it up. No wrong. We even said there are no wrong answers. Just be creative. And to tell you that this sent everybody for a loop, like we felt really bad after. We're like, we just tortured all these college kids with this question that we thought was just going to be a good time. Because before that, you know, sometimes we'll ask like, what would you want your walk-up song to be, and things like that, you know, that are kind of industry based. But yeah, it's like you're alone on the Zoom having to just speak your answer. You can't go back and edit them. It's like a one-stop shop. You know, we've seen some really strange things, you know, now that I'm on the team, like, you know, people's pets going crazy in the background, or people doing them in strange locations. Like we saw somebody once in the bathroom of a nightclub. So you do see some of that, you know, some strange things on people's walls. But it's it's tougher than it sounds. And I probably, now that I work at the Mets, I'm like, I don't think we need to use this all the time anymore. This is really hard. As hard as a regular interview is, I did think it was equally or more hard. More
But let me tell you right now, okay? So I'm in grad school now, so I try to remember authors and I try to remember dates and times. So Robert Frost, I found out a couple of weeks ago. Robert Frost said, poet Robert Frost said, "Never tear down a fence until you know why it was put up." Right now, that interview process sounds horrible to me. Right, like if I got a job there, I would come in and say, well, the first thing we're doing is we're getting rid of that interview process, right? I would get rid of, but I don't know why it was put up. Why was that put up? And and what are you doing about it now? Y'all still use it?
It's not really my space. We have people on my team who handle our recruitment and who are much more.
Can you give me their number so I can call them?
Yeah, and we don't use it in every case anymore, which is good. And I think what we don't do is, if we like somebody's, and I'm giving away the farm here. If we like somebody's resume and they totally blow this, we don't hold that against them. We would still give them the opportunity to come in person but I think we're using it less and less because, and not to disparage the company that does that. I'm sure it works for, probably technical jobs really well and things like that. You could also do questions where you have to type an answer. So that probably would work really well if there's like math jobs and things like that. But I try to give my opinion and to talk about it, but I know that our recruiters, I think we've moved further away from it than we did 5+ years ago when I did it. So
that sounds horrible.
It's very intimidating. To me, I thought though, when I first heard about it, I was like, this is going to be a breeze. There's not going to be anybody firing questions at you. You're not going to have to worry about being in the room with them. This is before the pandemic. So, we weren't as used to the kind of digital setting we are now. And I thought it was going to be a breeze, like, oh yeah, I can just kind of practice the general things I want to say and then I was like flop sweating and like rambling and just felt horrible after it. So, but I do think it's, as we've moved further into a digital age, even in a non-digital job, these types of things do happen. So, just the other day, somebody at work was asking me my opinion about group interviews, having multiple candidates be interviewed at the same time. And I said, absolutely don't do that. That's horrible. Don't do that. And part of that was because I just think it's a terrible environment. But I went to a training on unconscious bias recently, and they talk about the obvious ones, right? Any unconscious bias that we have, just general stereotypes. But they talked about an unconscious bias towards people who are shy or introverted, and I thought that was so interesting. Like how that affects people in their work life, and is something like a group interview. God, would that be a nightmare for somebody who's just like generally more introverted or more shy, and they might be the best person for the job that you're now losing. So I try to chip away at it, Kevin. I try not to throw the fist ever, but I've been saying, oh, you don't want to do those anymore, right? That's not the best thing.
Okay, that is so cute. That's so cute. So you survived the ordeal.
I did.
Does the job live up to your dream?
It's so interesting because people knew I was a Mets fan before I worked there. There's people in my life who are also Mets fans who only want to talk about it. I have a close friend whose family are all Mets fans, and she got married shortly after I joined the Mets, and I could not go to the bar or the bathroom at that wedding without being interrupted by 30 of her family members asking me about every experience I was having. And it doesn't matter if you have the most boring job at the Mets or the most interesting job at the Mets, people want to talk to you about it. And I usually tell people the same thing, which is most days it's a job like any other, right? There are expectations, there's paperwork, there are challenges and frustration, but mixed in there, of course, are experiences that I couldn't have dreamed of. A couple months ago, we had the first Old Timers Day at Citi Field. I think it was the first one in over 25 years. And I'm very lucky that some of my friends at the Mets really spoil me, and they give me these great assignments based on, these childhood heroes of mine. And I was walking back to the office at the end of this day where I had met all these idols of mine and taken pictures with these people who, I had posters of them on my wall, and I spent time with them and hung out and chatted and laughed with them. And I was walking back to the office and with our team president, Sandy Alderson, if you know him, and even that experience, even being a colleague of his and knowing him it blows my mind. And I remember saying to him, I said, most days I try to keep my obsessive fandom in check because you can't be that. You have to have kind of the ability to put them in their right place. There are times as an employee at the Mets where you can really be a fan, and there are times where you have to somewhat put it on a shelf. But I said to him, most of the time I can keep myself fairly cool. I said, but a day like today, the 15-year-old who still lives within me was losing her mind in every way. And if you had told me, in 1999 or 2000 when I was a teenager that I would be having a day like that, I would have called you a liar to your face. It would just never would have even, like I said to you earlier, I knew people worked at the Mets. I knew people worked in sports hyperbolically, but the idea of actually doing it myself, it was so far out of reach. And Sandy was very sweet. And he said, not only are you experiencing these things, but you also contribute here. You have an effect in this place that you love so deeply. And that's the part of it that, sets it apart beyond those, just the natural, meeting the players or being on the field on opening day, those types of things. Yeah, of course, those are exceptional experiences that only a handful of people get to do, but contributing to a place that you love that passionately, as much as working in NJ Transit was nice, I can't say that I'm like passionate about trains and buses, right? In that same way. So getting to have an impact and intersect with something that you love like that, it's very rare, and I'm very grateful for it. But yeah, it's most days are, I have a payroll meeting later. You know what I mean? Most days are a job, and that's okay. There's a give and take. There's a high and low.
When you work for NJ Transit, did they give you that gold pass that you can get on all the trains for free?
Strangely, when I was working there, and I won't name names, but the governor of New Jersey at the time is a very well-known, nationally known governor with an alliterative name, who, I think a month or two after I started working there, made it so that the people who worked there could no longer ride the services for free. And it became the only transit system in the country where their employees couldn't ride for free. And keeping in mind, the offices were in Newark, where there was no parking. You had to take mass transit to get there. So they were basically asking the people who worked there to just like give their money back. So it really landed like a brick when that happened. But so I did not get a very fancy gold card. But there is if you work in baseball for 25 years, you get a beautiful gold card from MLB where you can get 2 tickets to any baseball game during the regular season at any time, anywhere. So I got another 20 years for that one. So I'll shoot for that gold card.
Yeah. Okay. So you sounded brilliant your whole life. Did you ever need, city tutors, we have the city tutors and we have the city mentors. Did you ever need a tutor coming up?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it's so simple to think that if you need a tutor, it's because you're not intelligent. It's absolutely not the case. I mean, I think of my brother and I sort of as a perfect example, right? Things he was very good at. He was very good at like languages, which is something I really struggled with. We went to Hebrew school as kids. He was excellent at it. I barely got by. Took Spanish in high school, really struggled. My brother was very good at those things. And then there's something like math where he struggled a little more and I was better. And I think that idea of not everybody's going to be great at everything. So there's going to be a space where you excel and there's going to be a space where you might need help. And being able to feel comfortable asking for that help when you need it is really important. I definitely had tutors. Yeah, it probably in like science or languages were some of the things I was challenged with. Geometry, even though I felt like I was a very good math student, I was a good math student. Geometry totally eluded me. I couldn't understand it. It didn't get into my mind. And I was very lucky that some of my teachers really took the time to tutor me to get me through it. But even in a space that I felt really confident and good at, there was parts of it that I needed help. And I feel very lucky that people understood that it wasn't all encompassing and it wasn't a negative by any means. So I did some tutoring myself as well, with friends and wanted to, like, again, hey, if I feel good and confident in this, I want to be able to spread the love and to help with that.
And mentors, who were your mentors?
Gosh, well, I mentioned, they're not professional mentors, but they were kind of personal mentors. Is my mother and her business partner. Watching them when I was young. Strangely, it's such a strange thing to say because I've been working for a long time, but I worked at a day camp when I was young. I had gone there as a kid and I worked there. And there was a woman who I had known when I was a camper and who was my boss when I was a counselor, and she had an enormous impact on me. She unfortunately passed away very young, and I think about her often in so many ways, but she just kind of the way she told us what she expected of us and how she went about that really stuck with me. I remember there was one time she was disappointed with us, and I still remember exactly when and how she said it to us, because it had such an enormous impact, because it was somebody that I completely respected, that I really trusted and liked. And she really, strangely, a lot of the decision-making processes I saw her using in a strange microcosm of day camp are ones that I access in my work now, right? It's not one-to-one. You're not making the same decisions in a day camp that you would be in a separate professional environment. But the way she went about those decisions and the way that her kindness and thoughtfulness guided her, it really had an impact on me. And it's somebody that I think about often. Her name was Sue Rosen, so I always like to give a shout out to her. When I did AmeriCorps, the boss I had there, strangely, was only a couple of years older than us, who had sort of taken that path towards a nonprofit. Her name was Jen Shakaitis, and she really had a tremendous impact on all of us because she was a friend and a mentor at the same time. And I think sometimes having both these people I'm mentioning, I had a close personal relationship with as well. And I found a lot of mentorship from people who weren't my boss. I know that that's not something that people always highlight, right? They expect mentors to be their superiors, but I found mentorship so often with colleagues, people I've learned from side by side. When I worked at the hospital corporation, the person who did the same job as I did, we had completely different backgrounds. I was coming in to do employee relations with a law degree and only a couple years of experience. She hadn't graduated college, but she had 25 years of experience in that space. And I learned more from her than I've ever learned from anybody. Hello, Claudia Myers. And we were also incredibly close friends. And that personal relationship really made it easier for me to learn from her. At the Mets, I've had some terrific mentors. My close colleague at the Mets who recently left us, Eva Ramsaran, who I similarly, we were colleagues more than anything, but she taught me so much, and I've learned so much about kind of her approach to people and how seriously she takes her work and how much she's committed to it. And just a lot of terrific women at the Mets who own what they do, know it better than anyone I've ever seen, and really try to teach by doing. So there's some terrific people at the Mets that I look to. A great lady named Sue Lucci, who's been the VP of operations at the Mets for 20 years plus. And I've been very lucky that I've had friendships and guidance from people who've become mentors. As you look back, long list. All women. I probably shouldn't have done all women, but
so this will decide who was your greatest mentor. This question right here, right? And with this question, I don't want you to include anything I've said, because we've talked long enough now where you might consider me a mentor, but I don't count. Okay. But what's the best advice you ever received from a mentor or anyone?
Yeah, it's probably a terrible answer, but the greatest mentor, the person who impacted me the most, was my mother. Like I said, she was a working mother from the time I was very young, but she was still incredibly present in our lives. Personally, it never affected that. She was able to kind of that whole idea of having it all. But I also had this front row seat to see how she went about her work. I used to work for her in the summers and stuff when I was young, and I saw firsthand what she was producing and how she was doing it. And she literally wanted to call her business integrity for a while, like the name of her business, because it was so important to her and her partner to have that. And she, again, that kind of same process, she owned what she did. She was the best at it. It was part of her identity. And her success was based on that. It wasn't coming for free. It wasn't, she wasn't getting anything, without the effort. She was putting in that effort day in and day out through experience, through knowledge, through commitment, and through integrity. And the advice she's always given me kind of comes from that, right? The confidence that I feel now in my role is inspired by that. And like I said, when I was reaching for something like this that didn't feel tangible, it was her saying to me, somebody's going to get it. It's going to be you. It might as well be you. And that, she doesn't see my brother and I objectively. Of course she doesn't. Whose parents do, right? You're talking about your own kids. You don't see them objectively. You can't. You love them too much. And I've always, I always knew that going in, right? She always thinks, of course, she thinks I'm perfect. I'm the best. I got to get it. But at the same time, her point was incredibly valid, and it really did help me, and it did guide me in the initial endeavor. So I can't pretend that anybody has had as much of an impact on me than my mother, and professionally, personally, politically, all of those things. Just kind of in terms of who I've become.
Well, your mother thinks you're perfect. I think you're perfect. What is the best advice you could share with young people who may stumble across this interview?
Yeah, the idea is always, the world is skewed, right? It's not perfect. We're far from it. There's always going to be advantages that people have that we can't control, right? There's always going to be factors that we can't control. The only thing you can control is you, and how you conduct yourself and how you engage with people. There are a lot of people who do what I do for a living, and they do it with, like an iron fist and a lot of coldness, and that just never felt right to me. So don't change who you are for what you want to do. Be who you are in what you want to do. People talk so often about the value of a first impression, and of course that's important, right? But most of the time, what people remember in a first impression is if they liked you, or what you were wearing, or how your hair looked that day. What people are going to remember most is the first time they worked with you, the first time they saw how you thought, how you communicated. That's what they want to see. So put your best foot forward. Always be that version of yourself that feels authentic. And whether it gets you exactly what you want all the time, maybe my authentic self wouldn't have been at the Mets, right? If that might not have been the right fit, and that would have been okay. But at the end of the day, when you're 10 plus years into your career like I am, that's what's going to serve you best, and that's what's going to make you confident in what you do.
Of this interview, the World Series just ended.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I guessed it right. I guessed the winner in the amount of games, which I'm very proud of. We can't bet on baseball, working at a professional team, but we do talk about these things, and I did gloat to my coworker who I got that right to. I'm happy with the results. I guess the teams that were in it wouldn't have been my choice. I certainly, would have liked to see the Mets make it a little further. The Mets won in 1986, and I don't quite remember that one. So it's been a while, and I'll keep waiting. But I'm very happy for the manager of the winning team, a longtime baseball legend, a good person, well deserved in that space. So we'll give them the edge there, and I'm happy for the result. Was that cryptic enough? Cryptic enough for the podcast?
Well, you know what? When I end the recording, I'm going to ask you the question again. You could tell me your real answer.
Okay,
right?
exactly.
No, but listen, it was an absolute pleasure. You are. It's a pleasure to speak to someone who actually got their dream job, who was actually living their dream. I think I'm living my dream too. It's not specifically from the job, but I'm on the path that I'm enjoying to no end. So I love being able to be introduced to people like yourself, and get to know the little things, the things, because you started the interview by saying you had a pretty normal life, right?
Mhm.
But once you entered this arena, it's not normal anymore. You know that, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, yeah, the last 5 years have been bonkers as much as they can be for an average person like myself. Yeah, of course. And I'm truly honored, to be able to talk to anybody about this. I love it, and I'm so grateful for everything that's come my way. And if nothing else, I just will do anything to pay it forward. That's the least I can do. And I'm really excited to have met you. My friend Allie totally lost her mind. I'm a big 30 Rock fan, but she's a bigger 30 Rock fan. So Allie completely lost her mind when I told her that I was meeting you. And she's been waiting with bated breath for me to tell her about it. But I'm really honored to have the opportunity to talk to you. And I'm so amazed by the work that City Tutors does. And I'm so passionate about your goals. So whatever I can do to participate is the least I can do.
Well, thank you. Give a shout out to Allie. Tell her that, I'm a little busy because I'm in grad school. So if she can wait a year for me to finish this program, then, we might be able to meet. And then she'll be old enough for us to actually go out and have a legal date, because I'm sure
we're 21. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure
we're
she's
21
young
years
like
old.
you.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm sure she's just as young as you. But no, tell her I said hello. And
I love that.
But it was a pleasure meeting you, and I'm a fan of yours for sure. And I thank you for giving us this time for sure.
Of course, thank you so much. I've truly enjoyed this, and it's such a strange thing to talk about yourself like this, but I'm really honored and flattered. So thank you again.